On the afternoon of the 16th of January, 1979, the Shah of Iran walked out to an aircraft at Tehran airport. He climbed into the left-hand seat and flew it out of the country himself. His wife sat in the cabin behind him. He told the people seeing him off that he was tired and that he was going abroad for a rest. He commanded a nation of 35 million people and one of the strongest armies in the Middle East. He held the legacy of 2,500 years of Persian monarchy. He had been on the throne for 37 years. He never saw Iran again. What happened over the next 18 months is the part almost nobody knows. He did not retire to a villa on a coast somewhere. He never settled anywhere at all. He moved through 6 countries in a year and a half. In most of them, he was either asked to leave or told in advance not to come at all. He was not flying towards an exile that had been arranged for him. Nothing had been arranged. Beyond the first week, no country in the world was waiting to receive him. The United States had a standing invitation out to him and quietly withdrew it. Britain sent a man to the Bahamas to refuse him to his face. Morocco gave him a week. Mexico let him in and then would not let him back. And he was carrying a cancer that had been diagnosed 5 years earlier while he was still on the throne. Almost nobody knew about it. That included the government that had built its entire policy in the region on him. This is what happened to Iran's royal family after the revolution. The aircraft landed at Aswan in southern Egypt, where President Anwar Sadat was waiting on the runway for him. Egypt had not been chosen at random. The Shah's first wife had been an Egyptian princess, a sister of King Farouk. And there was something else of his in Cairo. His own father, Reza Shah, had died in exile in South Africa in 1944. His body had been brought to Cairo and laid in a mosque there. It stayed in that mosque for 6 years until Iran was ready to bring him home in 1950. Remember that mosque. At Aswan, the Shah ran into Gerald Ford, the former American president, who happened to be touring the region that week. It was a courtesy meeting between 2 men who no longer held office. It was also about the last ordinary thing that happened to him. He stayed in Egypt a week. Then he went to Morocco as the guest of King Hassan II. He was in Morocco for 10 weeks, and during those 10 weeks, the position hardened. The new government in Tehran wanted him sent back to stand trial, and it was promising consequences for any country that sheltered him. Hassan began to feel the weight of that. So Hassan asked him to leave. He did not come and say it himself. He sent a former American official who was by then working as a paid lobbyist for Morocco. The Shah asked his Muslim brother for 10 days. Hassan gave him a week. Washington had been promising him a home for years, and Washington was where he expected to go. The Americans had a standing invitation out to him. He had been their closest ally in that region for a quarter of a century. So from Morocco, on the 22nd of February, he sent word to Washington that he would like to take the invitation up now. President Carter decided that he could not come. The reasoning was not personal, and it was not really about him. There were American citizens inside Iran. There were contracts and oil and a new government making threats. The same arithmetic was being done in London, Paris, Bern, and Vienna, and it produced the same answer in every one of them. Richard Parker, the American ambassador to Morocco, had to carry that decision to him and say it to his face. Parker said afterwards that he felt ashamed. Then there was Britain, and what Britain did is worse. The British government sent Sir Dennis Wright out to see him. Wright was its own former ambassador to Tehran, a man the Shah knew personally, and he was flown to the Bahamas with 2 instructions. The first was to tell the Shah that he could not come to England. The second was to ask the Shah for a favor. If the question were ever raised in public, London wanted to be able to say that the Shah had understood and accepted the decision. right was to secure his agreement to that in advance. They asked the man they were refusing to help them explain the refusal. The Bahamas took him on the 30th of March and put him on Paradise Island. He was there 11 weeks, and the stay cost $1.2 million. That figure tells you what he had become. He was no longer a head of state with a treasury behind him. He was a wealthy private customer in a country that had worked out how badly he needed to stay. On the 13th of April, he broke his silence for the first time since leaving Tehran. He said he was shocked and horrified by the executions being carried out in Iran. The men being shot, as he put it, had committed no crime except love of their country. When his Bahamas visa ran out, he moved on again. On the 10th of June, he flew to Mexico and took a rented villa at Cuernavaca, 30 miles south of the capital. He was in Mexico for 18 weeks. That was the longest he stayed anywhere in the whole 18 months, and it was the closest thing to a settled life he had after Tehran. The visitors tell you what he was by then. Henry Kissinger came almost immediately, and Richard Nixon flew down on the 13th of July to see an old friend. Both of those men were out of office. Every serving Western politician stayed well away. He was well enough to receive them and to talk and to be photographed doing it. He was not well. He was dying, and he had been dying for 5 years. The cancer had been found in 1974, when he was still on the throne and at the very height of his power. 2 French doctors were flown secretly into Tehran, and they diagnosed a lymphatic cancer. The younger of the 2, Georges Flandrin, took over the treatment. Over the next 5 years, Flandrin made 38 separate journeys to Iran to see his patient. The journeys were concealed. So was the diagnosis from almost everybody. It was concealed so effectively that the Americans never found out. The United States ran one of its largest intelligence operations anywhere in the world out of Iran. It had backed this man since 1953, when American and British action helped restore him to power after a confrontation with his own parliament. And it did not learn that he had cancer until a few days before he flew to New York in the October of 1979. That is worth sitting with. Washington built its whole policy for the region on one man staying alive and did not know he was dying. On the 22nd of October 1979, he was admitted to a hospital in New York for treatment. The Carter administration let him in on humanitarian grounds after Henry Kissinger and David Rockefeller pressed hard for it, and against explicit warnings about what it might cost. 13 days later, students stormed the American embassy in Tehran and took the staff hostage. They were held for 444 days. The crisis dominated the rest of Carter's presidency. All of it began 13 days after an American hospital admitted a dying man on humanitarian grounds. That was the risk every other government had refused to take. And on the 29th of November, Mexico announced that he would not be allowed back. Panama took him next, and Panama very nearly finished him. He left New York on the 2nd of December, flying out through an American Air Force base in Texas, and he was in Panama for 12 weeks. William Ashcross, who wrote the book on this last journey, described the place as a gangster's wonderland. The Shah was now being charged for everything. The food bill for the National Guardsmen assigned to protect him came to $21,000 a month. One Panamanian doctor asked $1,800 for a single visit. Then in December, the government of Iran began proceedings to have him extradited and sent back for trial. Panama's ruler, Omar Torrijos, allowed those proceedings to run. Torrijos told him there was nothing to worry about. He said he might have to arrest him and photograph him behind bars, but that it would only be propaganda, staged to deceive the Iranians. The Shah did not find this as reassuring as it was intended to be. Shawcross summed up what he had become by then. He was the inhabitant of temporary lodgings and rented houses, he wrote, and the prey of money gougers and profiteers. He was also getting sicker, and his doctors had begun fighting each other over him. The Americans and the Panamanians argued about which of them should remove his spleen and where it should be done, and under whose medical license. At one point, while they argued in front of him about his own body, the Shah stood up and walked out of the room. He left Panama on the 23rd of March, 1980. Iran filed the extradition papers the following day. Sadat took him back in, and Sadat was the only man who would. He landed in Egypt on the 24th of March, 1980. 4 days later, the American surgeon, Michael DeBakey, removed his spleen in a Cairo hospital. He never really recovered from the operation. On the 27th of July, 1980, at 9:15 in the morning, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi died in a military hospital in Cairo. He was 60 years old. He had been out of Iran for 18 months and 11 days. Sadat gave him a state funeral with full military honors on the 30th of July. Egypt buried him as a king. Look at who came to it. Sadat, Richard Nixon, 6 years out of office. Constantine, the former king of Greece, who had lost a throne of his own. That is the list. Not one serving head of government from any Western country attended the funeral of a man all of them had called an ally. The Washington Post's correspondent summed him up in one sentence the day he died. Born a commoner but raised to rule, he wrote, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi died a king without a throne. He was buried in the Al-Rifai Mosque in Cairo. And now the mosque matters. Al-Rifai holds the tombs of Egypt's royal family, the dynasty that fell in 1952. King Fuad lies there. So does King Farouk, the brother of the Shah's first wife, and his own father had lain in that same building from 1944 until 1950, until Iran came and took him home. There was no taking this one home. The mausoleum built for his father outside Tehran was demolished that same year on the orders of the Revolutionary Court. Empress Farah and the children stayed in Egypt for 2 years after the funeral at the Kuba Palace and then settled in the United States. There were 4 children of that marriage. Reza, the crown prince, born in 1960, Faranaz in 1963, Ali Reza in 1966, and Layla in 1970. There was one older daughter, Shanaz, from his first marriage. Reza, the eldest, was 19 when that aircraft left Tehran and 20 when his father died. Layla was 9 years old when the aircraft left Tehran. She was 10 when her father died in Cairo. Think about that childhood from the inside. Between the ages of 9 and 10, she was moved through Egypt, Morocco, the Bahamas, Mexico, the United States, and Panama. She was put into an American school in Cairo, somewhere in the middle of it. On the 10th of June, 2001, she was found dead in a hotel in West London. She was 31 years old, and the death was ruled a suicide. Her mother spoke about it afterwards, and her words are better than anybody else's. For the past few years, she said, Layla had been very depressed. Time had not healed her wounds. She was exiled at the age of 9, and she never surmounted the death of her father, to whom she was particularly close. Layla was buried in Paris beside her grandmother. Her brother Ali Reza never got over losing her. On the 4th of January 2011, he died at his home in Boston at the age of 44. His family confirmed that it was a suicide after years of depression. Farah outlived her husband and 2 of her 4 children, and the Shah is still in Cairo. He has been lying in another dynasty's mausoleum in a country that was never his for 46 years.